Welcome to Episode 10 in this series on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We've been moving at a decent pace through the book so far, but this episode we're going to slow down and take a close look at Chapter 9.
To quickly recount what happened last episode, Frankenstein's creation has murdered his younger brother and framed his family's innocent ward, Justine, for the crime. As punishment, Justine is sentenced to death. Frankenstein is plunged into a deep depression, and in an attempt to help him recover, his father decides to relocate them all back to Victor's childhood home, in the shadow of Mont Blanc. This is where Victor picks up his tale at the start of Chapter 9.
This is a crucial chapter in the book for a number of reasons. First and foremost, it's the first time that we see the monster animated and in clear daylight. Up until this moment, the monster's either been described in snippets of detail delivered by Frankenstein, or as glimpses of something during flashes of lightning.
A key way that the Gothic tradition generates and maintains a sense of discomfort is through the concealment and obfuscation of the creature or thing we're supposed to be scared of. So the fact that we come face to face with the monster this early, in the light of day, is interesting in that it disrupts the conventional Gothic structure.
Add to that the fact that not only do we see the monster, but we hear him speak and will eventually enter into his own frame narrative, and the monster's arrival becomes a hugely disruptive moment, not just to Frankenstein, but to us as readers. The monster's confrontation of his creator is a crucial chapter, and directly opposes the original moment of abandonment we discussed earlier in Episode 8.
The monster enters the scene as a physical spectacle, but over the course of this chapter, he becomes an emotional and verbal figure. This not only shows us as readers that Frankenstein's narration up to this point, and perhaps after, cannot fully be trusted, it also draws us deeper into the story, with a desire to listen to the monster's narrative.
Before we can really dig into these points, it's important to follow the path of this chapter. It opens with Frankenstein finding solace in the landscape. He tells Walton how the natural world of his childhood home afforded him the greatest consolation he was capable of receiving. As he put it, although they did not remove my grief, they subdued and tranquilized it.
These lofty heights that Frankenstein is walking through, his supposed elevated position as Lord of life and death. However, the sublime experiences he reports to Walton serve to undermine that powerful position and remind him of the natural laws which he has defied. As Frankenstein's walks become more serious and he ascends higher into the mountains, he describes the landscape becoming terrifying and disturbing.
The path, as you ascend higher, is intersected by ravines of snow, down which stones continually roll from above. One of them is particularly dangerous, as the slightest sound, such as even speaking in a loud voice, produces a concussion of air sufficient to draw destruction upon the head of the speaker. The pines are not tall or luxuriant, but they are sombre and add an air of severity to the scene.
Looking out over this sublime setting, Frankenstein laments the superior intellect of humanity. He speculates what life would be like if, like brute animals, human impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire. In his eyes, humanity would be almost free if they only cared for their survival.
But now we are moved by every wind that blows, and a chance word or scene that this world may convey to us.
This is a direct criticism of Enlightenment thinking, and the way that humankind seeks an explanation for everything they see in the world. Frankenstein, and therefore by extension Mary Shelley, is implying that he and his loved ones would not be in this danger had he not been encouraged to push boundaries and explore areas of science that they weren't ready to discover.
At the same time as Frankenstein is making this argument, we're treated to a description of Mont Blanc in all its awful majesty. The snowy peaks and cold cliff edges echo the winter setting of the Arctic where we first encountered Frankenstein, and we're invited to make the link between this moment and Frankenstein's first appearance. We also catch our first proper glimpse of the monster in daylight.
I suddenly beheld the figure of a man, at some distance, advancing towards me with superhuman speed. He bounded over the crevices in the ice, among which I had walked with caution. His stature also, as he approached, seemed to exceed that of man. I perceived as the shape came nearer, sight tremendous and abhorred, that it was the wretch whom I had created.
Victor's description of the approaching monster is in line with all he's said in the past. Even as his creation gets closer, he works hard to push it away from him.
His countenance bespoke bitter anguish, combined with disdain and malignity, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes. But I scarcely observed this. Anger and hatred had at first deprived me of utterance, and I recovered only to overwhelm him with words expressive of furious detestation and contempt.
However, when the monster arrives by Frankenstein, he speaks, and with such elegance as to surprise both Victor and the reader. With his first words, the monster paints a picture of a creature neglected and abandoned by an irresponsible creator.
You, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life?
It's quite a scolding for Frankenstein, who's condemned for his callous and careless treatment of life and death. Indeed, it's ironic that Frankenstein's creation seems to hold the natural order of things in higher regard than Victor ever did. At the same time, the monster is educated with the ideas of good, evil, the divine and the mortal. He also possesses a strong sense of morality and what it means to be human. Life, he says to Frankenstein, is dear to me, and I will defend it.
At the same time, the monster is not a complete innocent. While he claims to value life, he also makes it clear that he won't hesitate to kill more of Frankenstein's family and friends if he doesn't get his way.
Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends.
It's interesting that the monster makes mention of duty. In doing so, he invests Frankenstein with the responsibilities of a parent. Remember in a previous episode when we talked about motherhood? In this moment, the monster marries the idea of motherhood with the idea of divine creation, naming Frankenstein his natural lord and king. The monster argues that it, of all creatures, is most deserving of Frankenstein's justice.
At the same time, the monster emphasizes the guilt that Frankenstein should feel at having abandoned him. Had he been treated better, the monster implies, it would never have turned to murder.
I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend.
This reference to Adam is important, as it highlights the significance of Frankenstein's creation. In creating this monster, he has created new man, one which is superior in height, power, and who knows how else. In doing so, Frankenstein has defied the divine law of God and created something that is opposed to humanity, whether it wanted to be or not. This is a serious point of distress for the monster, who wishes to be defined by the same standards as humanity, but cannot be because they reject him outright.
I was benevolent. My soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone? Miserably alone. You, my creator, abhor me. What hope can I gather from your fellow creatures who owe me nothing?
In this moment, the monster is a tragic figure. He emphasizes how he was born good, with a soul that glowed with love and humanity. Despite this, he is spurned to wander desert mountains and dreary glaciers. As a result, the monster begins to associate sublime environments with safety and belonging.
The caves of ice, which I only do not fear, are a dwelling to me, and the only one which man does not grudge. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings.
In doing so, he further allies himself with the otherness that separates him from humanity.
It's important to pay attention to the manner in which the monster speaks as well. His language not only mimics the book of Genesis with references to Adam, it also draws links with Milton's Paradise Lost, an epic poem about the fall of man. The monster is obviously educated and emotionally mature, and with each articulate description, he's taking control of his own life's narrative.
Exactly. As he speaks, the physical, grotesque being of Frankenstein's description becomes a verbal, emotional and sensitive being. At the same time, the manner of the monster's speech and the access it has to its own emotions mark it with all the characteristics of the Romantic era. In particular, the monster's willingness to embrace overwhelming emotions are a key signifier of their romantic ideals.
It's at this point that the monster takes complete control of his narrative. He entreats Frankenstein to listen to his tale and learn how the monster came to be this way. The monster's request is accompanied by the re-emergence of the sun from behind the clouds.
Hear my tale. It is long and strange, and the temperature of this place is not fitting to your fine sensations. Come to the hut upon the mountain. The sun is yet high in the heavens. Before it descends to hide itself behind yon snowy precipices and illuminate another world, you will have heard my story and can decide.
This link to the Enlightenment suggests to us as readers that what we're about to hear is the truth, or at least another version of it.
The chapter ends with Victor conceding to the wishes of the monster. He admits for the first time that he feels the duties of a creator towards his creature, and resolves to do his best to make the monster happy once more, before complaining that it's wicked. There ends for the moment Frankenstein's narrative, and we enter into our third frame narrative, that of the monster itself.
That's enough for this episode. Next time we'll delve into the story of the monster and how it came to be the eloquent, romantic and tortured soul we met on the side of Mont Blanc.
We'll see you next time.